Hey everyone, welcome to Sociastrology. I am astrologer Shannon Cunningham, and today we are going to be diving into the lunar eclipse in Pisces that's going to be taking place on the 28th of August of 2026. This is going to be right around 4 or 5 degrees of Pisces, and it's going to be right on top of a very major star in the sky that is deeply storied over millennia. So this is one of the brighter stars in the sky. It was one of the 4 major Persian stars or directional stars. It's said to be the watcher of the south. It has become associated with Archangel Gabriel, and it winds up blending together a lot of the significations of Aquarius and Pisces. So with Aquarius, this kind of social humanitarian outlook, and then the compassion of Pisces blended together with that. Ultimately, what this star winds up guarding is the greater good, the human condition. So it's very supportive of humanity, of humanitarianism. It fosters progress, individuality, freedom, and can even help with advancing sciences, new ideas that help humanity. So we're likely to see that really emphasized and exalted during this period of time. Now, the thing with eclipses that can be kind of funny is that they can bring a huge amount of consequences. And this star doesn't really pull its punches when it's dealing with energies that would seek to undermine the human condition. So we are likely to see a lot of fireworks around anyone or any energies that are deemed to be quite harmful to people, generally speaking. But we could even find this eclipse protecting a lot of people on a personal level, especially through intuition, through guidance, through strange experiences and occurrences that seem to come out of nowhere and seem almost inexplicable. So we're going to go through a lot of the technical details here. We'll give an overview. We'll go ahead and look at this on a collective energetic level, and then we'll do some global predictions based on this. And there will be horoscopes as well for each sign to look at where this is most likely to impact you in your life. All of that's going to be time-stamped, but let's go ahead and dive deeper into this. So first off, I do want to clarify, this is going to be the night of the 27th into the 28th so that you don't miss the eclipse. It's going to be at least partially visible pretty much everywhere except East Asia and Australia. It's going to wind up centering over the Americas, so it'll be most total over the center of the Americas. And what stands out most about this eclipse is this aspect pattern configuration that it's making in the sky. So we have the eclipsed moon in early Pisces. On the other side, of course, we have the sun, but we also have Mercury. And this is in Virgo. So Mercury rules Virgo. It's in its own sign, but it is also obscured in the sky, similar to how the moon becomes obscured when it's eclipsed. So is Mercury. It's too close to the sun to be visible in the sky. Additionally, we have these squares, or what these bright red lines are called, and those are coming to Uranus in Gemini. And Gemini is also ruled by Mercury. Now, what this is likely to indicate here is that facts and information are likely to slip during this period of time. We're likely to get some very weird or shocking news, maybe not on a personal level, maybe more so on a global level, though I think that there's going to be a lot of strange communications or thoughts, insights that we wind up developing on a personal level through this eclipse as well. This is likely to drive a general restless feeling in the air, in the energy, at least a week before and after this eclipse. Additionally, eclipses themselves are known for bringing up unusual events and experiences and a certain disruptiveness to the routine. But so is Uranus. And so when we're getting these hard aspects to Uranus, that's really amplifying the fact that this is likely to be pretty shocking at times. It's likely to be pretty erratic. There are definitely going to be some surprises that wind up emanating from this eclipse. And again, a lot of that is probably going to be information-based because of the involvement of the Mercury-ruled signs here. However, given the fact that the moon is in Pisces, this is also bringing up a lot about belief and ideology. What do we believe in? Who do we believe in? How do we feel about things? Where is our compassion? How have we been utilizing our compassion? And we're going to dig into that more as we tease out the significations of this eclipse. But I will say overall as well, this is likely to be a time where you feel much more spiritually connected and guided than usual. these Pisces eclipses have been very strong on that level. So this is the third lunar eclipse in Pisces in a series that's been going on. We've had one in September of 2024. We had one in September of last year, 2025. And now we're getting this one. And if you think back to those times, I would imagine that you can remember that there was this kind of foggy veil being thin, insights and intuition and gut feelings, this kind of spiritual development energy that seemed to really permeate the air during those times. People were really sensitive during those Septembers as well. So it's likely to draw up a lot of that, and perhaps even to a higher extent with this being on such an important star as well. So that's most of our details here. I just want to cover a couple other things, which is that this is in a trine to Mars. So this is increasing the likelihood that we're actually going to be able to act on some of these spiritual or emotional insights that we get. If we can act on our compassion, that's just going to be the absolute best. Being sensitive and caring not only about our feelings and our perspective, but also that of others. But we have these really interesting simultaneous aspects coming from Saturn as well, where Mars is moving into a square with Saturn, while Jupiter is moving into a trine with it. Now, this trine from Jupiter is an alignment that is pretty rare. We're actually going to discuss this in the next video. These only happen about twice every 20 years or so. So one from this side and then, one from the other side. But they're extraordinarily constructive and helpful. So they tend to take a longer view, trying to make sure that our plans and our ideas are really sustainable. Now, this square, though, between Mars and Saturn is likely to increase this restlessness. So not only do we have somewhat weird information that may not be the most reliable, things are definitely going to be different than they appear to be during this time. But we may also find that we're not quite sure how to act about this either. We're not quite sure how to take action because the information is so unclear, or it seems like there's new information dropping left and right, or almost like we're getting mixed signals. So Saturn's going to try and slow down this Mars here, and I just think that that's really well advised. Leaning into this trine between that eclipsed moon and this Mars in Cancer, just kind of slowing down, going based on our gut, but also allowing for our ideas to percolate, to develop before we commit to any kind of action during this time. I will say, though, with Mars in Cancer and then this eclipsed moon in Pisces, this could absolutely create water issues. This is the part of the water which has just been kind of released from the jug of Aquarius, the water bearer. And this is the star, this Fomalhaut, is the star that's in the mouth of the fish. So this is likely to speak to bodies of water, rivers, weather, and there could be a combination of issues between heat and water. So with all of that said, let's go ahead and look at this from a collective energetic level. So as I mentioned, we've only been getting lunar eclipses in Pisces. We haven't gotten any solar eclipses. And this indicates the importance of releasing or allowing for changes, clearing away, potentially of belief systems or ideas that we've held on to, the kind of healing of our narratives around ourselves and the world. And this has really been catalyzed through significant events in our own lives as well as out in the world, especially around, again, September of 2024, September of 2025. I'll also just quickly point out, September 2024 was during the US presidential election season, and 2025 was when Charlie Kirk passed. So I think that we can see how some of that conversation around belief has been catalyzed by these eclipses. But more so than that, I think that this is bringing up notions of what do we believe in? What is our belief system? What do we value? What do we care about? What are we devoted to? And these eclipses have brought spiritual knowledge from these very unusual events or insights. So absolutely expect intuitive hits and insights, communication from beyond the veil. One thing that I think is going to be interesting last time, which was not so present in these eclipses before, is this square between Pisces and Gemini. And this may be bringing to mind, or it may be bringing to our awareness, how thin the line can be between intuition and nerves. Maybe how to differentiate between those feelings. Is that a gut instinct or is it butterflies in your stomach, right? So, on a collective level, we are likely to see some development around belief systems or ideas, maybe even some of those grand narrative kind of ideologies. We're likely to see some breaking points along those lines as well. Maybe this is a new representation of an ideology that is bursting onto the scene, or challenges to ideas, bringing different perspectives into the conversation. And hopefully, a lot of these ideas or conversations that are springing onto the scene will center around compassion and sensitivity. But as I mentioned, if they don't, if there is some karmic lesson that's needed around that, the star doesn't pull its punches. So it's going to make its point around that. It can wind up undercutting some of those that it feels have not been acting in the higher good of humanity, that hasn't been fostering understanding of others and different kinds of perspectives. So let's look at this from the perspective of this alignment that it's making here. Mercury is very important in this whole conversation. It has a very complex relationship with Pisces. So it's the only planet that has both its rulership, so it rules Virgo, but also its exaltation in one sign. So that's in Virgo. This is the place that it most prefers to be because there's plenty of conversation, there's plenty of exchange of ideas, but there's also this kind of methodical organizational quality to Virgo. Now, that is very much lacking in Pisces. And so with that being the opposite sign, it has both its detriment and its fall, is how that's referred to in Pisces. Now, during the last eclipse along this axis, which was the lunar eclipse in Virgo that took place on the 3rd of March of 2026, we actually had the Mercury, which was ruling that eclipse. It was in Pisces and it was retrograde. So it was very weakened. And there was this unbelievable poor judgment that was acted upon during that period of time. And so we may see some karmic lessons around that as well, of refusing to take on certain information or refusing to see the likely outcomes of the actions that were taken, especially on the global stage, but perhaps even in our own lives. If we were shutting down certain information sources, likely there's been some complication along those lines, and this can help us to see that. Now, that may not be us, that may be people in our lives. It's definitely people on the global stage, but some of these revelations are likely to be quite shocking, and some of it absolutely may come through conversation or through collective discourse. So what are we all talking about? What is the news focused on? What are voters focused on? With all of the obscuration that's going on here too, with Mercury obscured by this condition is called being combust. It's considered to be kind of burnt out, but also, of course, with the obscuration of that full moon, probably there's going to be things coming up around like cover-ups or obfuscation of information, messes to clean up. And the squares to Uranus are bringing this kind of energy of electricity or tension. It may even feel like literally the air is highly charged or static. There may be this underlying sense of like stressors, even if we can't quite put our finger on why, this kind of restlessness of people and populations. This is likely then to further heighten the emotion. And for some people, this could feel like a pressure cooker. Now, if you feel that around this period of time, again, I'm going to keep preaching, slow things down. Better to do the Piscean thing of finding an escape or withdrawing from a situation rather than dealing with it head on. Mars in Cancer is also supporting that because we simply don't have the information available to us to necessarily commit to a direct course of action right now. The squares to Uranus are also heightening the impact of the change that's coming through with this eclipse. So this could really keep us on our toes through, again, about a week prior to about a week after this eclipse. We may need to adjust our plans or be very flexible about how things are going to turn out. We are likely to see some disruptions to media, technology, transit. I would not be just expecting that your commute is going to go well, especially as we get really close to this eclipse. But trade, technology, those disruptions could wind up being heightened or worsened, or there could be these sudden breakthroughs that wind up coming through with this alignment here. I hate to say that similar to the March 3rd lunar eclipse, there is likely to be this kind of erratic decision-making, this kind of recklessness. So because we know about that, we can utilize this. But people who don't know, okay, there's this crazy eclipse going on, maybe I should slow my roll. We are likely to see a lot of people kind of breaking, having these knee-jerk reactions, jumping to conclusions, making unnecessary decisions or commitments around this time. So I don't often say this, but if you are able to kind of advise people around you to maybe not make knee-jerk decisions around this time, I would really recommend it. If someone asks you for input, I would just say, slow down, let the season pass, and then make the decision a little bit later, especially as the information has cleared up. Especially due to this square between Mars and Saturn as well, that Saturn is going to be trying to enforce a level of responsibility around the action that we're taking. But when these two get into hard aspects, it can bring up issues of anger. We could see some collective hatred or some rough edges on a collective level as well. Hopefully not, but I would not be surprised by that. Like people acting even violently, I hate to say. But for the most part, this is just going to look like delays or being forced to slow down. So even as people try and make decisions and forge ahead in this energy, they're likely to run straight into obstacles that will force them to slow down anyway. So restraint is absolutely necessary here. I also think that pay attention to how people are acting, because this is going to be quite internalized. Mars and Saturn, they're known as malefic planets. Basically, what that means is that they can be quite complicated, again, especially when they're in a hard aspect to each other. But they're in these very personal signs of Aries, which is all about the individual, you yourself, and then Cancer, which is all about the internal emotions and the internal state. And so there could be, as people are a little bit edgy, a bit restless, internally could be that kind of pressure cooker where they are deeply frustrated and maybe bottling things up. So again, I would preach some level of patience with people. Try again to be compassionate. Now, I'm going to save the best news around this aspect-wise for last. Again, just speaking to this trine between Jupiter and Saturn. If we are taking a long view, if we are trying our best to be responsible, if we are trying our best to be in integrity, to do the right thing for ourselves and others and our futures, if we're not acting on emotion during this time, this alignment is incredibly functional and very sustainable, especially around our sense of self. If we've been acting in integrity and compassionately, we may actually find ourselves in a pretty strong position around this time. We may have some breakthroughs around our long-term plans to become more independent or to lean into our own courage and adventurousness, to claim our lives for ourselves. That's all really well supported here. What's great about these trines between Saturn and Jupiter is that Saturn really puts us in touch with what are the limitations, what are the rules? And then that trine to Jupiter shows us how can we grow beyond this in a sustainable, steady way so that we're not destabilizing ourselves. So expect for some very tenacious new plans, some enthusiasm to build around growth, around constructing the kind of future that you're wanting for yourself. This, I think, is going to be great. If we can kind of focus on our long-term plans, not necessarily feeling the need to act upon these things right now, but laying that all out, getting in touch with how we feel about things. This eclipse is likely to point out where something may sound good in theory or on paper, but we may not be cognizant of the fact that actually that's not going to inspire us long term. And so we may have this intuitive sense of maybe I don't want to do this. How can I adjust that plan so that it's going to feed my soul for longer, so that I'm actually going to be inspired to that end for longer as well? What do you really want? That, I think, is really going to be emphasized here. Additionally, any sort of emotional or psychological influences are likely to be clarified here as well. So where have those been impacting our sense of what we should be prioritizing, or our sense of what's going to be successful for us, or what success should look like for us? Ultimately, if we can stay open to new information of all kinds. So what are the literal observable circumstances that we're dealing with? What kind of information are we getting about how those circumstances are likely to change, how we can act upon them to improve them for ourselves or for society? There's likely to be some weird revelations around this time, so staying open and paying attention to that as well, but also not discounting one of the best information sources, which is our own intuition, and the fact that the veil is thin, and the fact that a lot of people are going to be guided by their better angels during this time. Now, finally, one thing I want to put out there for everyone, regardless of where this is falling in your chart, there are a couple of ways that Pisces tends to cope. One is by escape, which is what I basically recommended. Withdraw from a situation if it's too pressurized. Give yourself some time. Give yourself some breathing space to be able to connect into your intuition and feel your way through a situation. The other is through potential substances or things like that. I'm not thrilled with the square to Uranus that this is making here. So I do think that people are going to be more sensitive to that kind of thing. There may be weird additives, or there may be just weird stories that wind up coming up around people having major issues with substances. So I would stay pretty far away from that if you can during this period of time. So let's talk about some global predictions from this. This is big time going to be about beliefs. As I mentioned, September 2024, September 2025, that was a really big thing. And it's likely that this is going to become more of an issue again, reinforcing polarization, the extreme nature of beliefs, dogmatism. This could even represent some religious conflicts. So issues of nationalism and religious nationalism could wind up coming up quite strongly with this. Now, remembering that this is on Fomalhaut. So this star, which speaks to our better angels, the greater good, is our belief, is that polarization for the greater good? I don't think it is. And so the actors that have been maybe behind that, those that are going to these extremes, are likely to be disrupted during this time, especially if they've undermined the encouragement to understand other people's perspectives. Or worse, if there's been any violence around that. There could be some more as well coming up around this time. A lot of that may be driven by delusional extremes of belief. This could also, I hate to say, but this could also be some false flags. I don't usually mention that. I don't usually recommend allowing for ourselves to just kind of come to conclusions that are comfortable for us about how things go. But the information space is so bad here that that kind of would not surprise me. So the reason for that is that this Mercury is combust. It's ruling this Uranus as well. And there's potentially a lot of obscuration around what's actually driving events or what the actual catalyst is. So this is another great reason to slow our roll and not jump to conclusions around who is actually doing what in a given situation. Religious conflicts, there's also a lot of potential for that here, I hate to say. Another thing that's important to note is that this north node that's in Aquarius, it's at 29 degrees of Aquarius. The United States moon is at 27 degrees of Aquarius. The solar eclipse that took place in February on the 17th was very close to that moon. That solar eclipse took place at 28 degrees of Aquarius. And Mars was coming up on that. And when it did, that was right around the 27th, 28th of February when the war started. So we had a combination of this kind of martialization in the US. That was also an eclipse that was in a square to Uranus, I will point out. And it was when that Mars square to Uranus happened that wound up getting kicked off, but also the insanely bad information space that we had because of Mercury being over here at the time, going retrograde and ruling the lunar eclipse. So we could see a lot of follow-on effects from that. I think we kind of already are, but I wouldn't be surprised to see that kind of raised to another level or further development along those lines and impacting the United States. Now, overall, not just for the US, we are expecting a lot of destabilizing, shocking, weird news and developments, shocking, weird discourse that winds up coming up and catalyzing change. We could even see issues around logistics, shipping, infrastructure that winds up coming up from this. So with all of that said, also important to keep in mind that eclipses tend to bring up challenges or losses of leadership or new leadership figures kind of bursting onto the scene. Now, the impact of either the eclipse that's taking place in Leo a couple weeks before this or this one, they're likely to blend together. It's probably going to be hard to tease out which one of these actually caused it. It's probably both of them hand in hand, but we may see some losses of leadership or some major challenges to like the legitimacy of leadership or the good judgment of leadership. Now, unfortunately, with this one as well, we may see this to some beloved figures too. And this doesn't just have to be on a political level. Sometimes it's celebrities that we care about a lot. Hopefully not, but some of this shocking news could be around some people that are just kind of generally beloved. And that can then wind up stirring up this compassionate action, this increased sensitivity. But coming back to global leadership, we are likely to see difficulties of and around war, around enforcement issues. There's likely to be, with this square between Mars and Saturn, an attempt to control matters, to rein something in, to address or deal with either issues if there's fallout around water or things like that, to try to relieve that, to try and step in, or to rein in a conflict, to rein in an extreme belief, maybe around nationalism. Mars and Cancer can wind up stirring that up, this kind of tribalism or aversion or conflict against quote unquote the other or something or some people who have been otherized. But there is this attempt to kind of rein that in, but it's difficult to see whether that's really going to work and how that's going to wind up playing out, because we do also have this trine then to Jupiter, and Jupiter sometimes can wind up, it tries to bring a good orderly situation about, but sometimes it can wind up exacerbating things. So we could see that there's a crackdown here that's authorized. And I'm going to get into this a little bit more later, but the last time that we saw Jupiter in Leo in a trine to Saturn in Aries was in July of 1967. And that was both around the time of like the summer of love, but it was also the long hot summer of 1967. So there were a lot of riots over police brutality and systemic racism. The Vietnam War sentiment was also massively shifting during that period of time. There was also, though, during that time, a lot of cultivation of leadership that wound up animating masses. So the people who were coming up around that time also wound up becoming these big leaders. In some cases, there's going to be issues of arrogance or hubris. Mars could even, in this square to Saturn, be assuming that it's capable of doing too much, or kind of overconfidence and acting on that overconfidence. But ultimately, I do think that out of this time, and then again, the further trines between Jupiter and Saturn that we're going to see next year as well, we will see the creation of some long-term movements, especially around sustainability or, again, the human condition. And I think it's interesting that the very first of these trines is occurring under this eclipse that's on Fomalhaut, that is all about the greater good, is all about following our better angels and the rewards of that. So I do expect a lot of new platforms, new movements, inspired, innovative ideas that a lot of people, I think, are going to be discussing and sorting out and following through on. What kinds of belief systems do we need going forward? What kind of hope do we need to get ourselves collectively and globally into a better situation? Do there need to be adjustments around who's authorized to do what and who has control over what? And what kind of action is authorized or legitimate going forward? Now, one last little thing that I want to point out is that looking at this square, again, it just worries me a little bit about the state of people's minds and the potential here for collective delusions, like a mass formation psychosis kind of a situation. I'm hoping that that's not the case, but that does really look like that to me. So hopefully that is temporary. Hopefully that's something that just kind of centers around the eclipse if that winds up coming up. Now, as I mentioned, this is visible pretty much everywhere, at least partially, except East Asia and Australia. It's going to center on the Americas, but I also like to look at where is an eclipse going to be angular. So where is it going to be rising? Where will it be culminating? Where will it be setting, and where will it be directly under the Earth? So these are what are called the angles. And of course, since it is most visible over the Americas, it is going to be perfectly culminating over Canada, Greenland, Venezuela, the Amazon, Bolivia, Argentina, the Virgin Islands as well, near Little St. James or whatever Epstein Island is called. So that's interesting. We may see some major weird revelations come out about from there or about that that wind up being a major catalyst for some of this change as well. It will be setting as well over Central Africa, north to south, over Central Europe, including Prague and Berlin and Copenhagen. It's going to be right on the Western horizon. It's going to be directly under Earth for Australia, Indonesia, China, and Russia. So any of the impacts there are likely to be under the radar, but it could be planting some major seeds there as well. But yeah, I think that that is a lot of what I want to say about this eclipse. I think it's going to be a very weird one, and I think that I can say that that's going to be weird with a capital W. That I think is going to be what really stands out about this is the unexpected nature of some very unusual events and catalysts, the information space being very fragmented, being very unreliable. I do think that the degree to which it's going to feel like the veil is thin and like we are getting personal guidance or are personally connected to energies beyond is going to be very strong here. I think that this is going to bring the biggest consequences of a rough nature to those that would seek to undermine the greater good or compassion. I think the news media is going to be potentially pretty disrupted by this as well. And that may even wind up creating something of an arc between this eclipse and then the lunar eclipse in Virgo, which is going to be taking place in February of next year. So let me show you that one as well. So as you can see, that same alignment is coming through in February with this lunar eclipse in Virgo. With that one, Mars is going to be right there with it, which is also somewhat disruptive of the information space. We have the squares to Uranus again. We have, again, the ruler of this eclipse it's Mercury, right? Because it's in Virgo. We had the same thing. There was a lunar eclipse in Virgo on March 3rd of 2026. So the ruler of that was Mercury. That was retrograde in Pisces at the time. This time it's retrograde in Aquarius. So again, a major potential for some regrettable decisions. Though this time it's probably much more even than 2026 of you should have known better, around some of the erratic decision making. So if there is a lot of complications to news media around this period of time, or even just looking at a lot of the disruptions or the obscuration of information, which is to say the potential lies and manipulations that could come through around the time of this eclipse, we are likely to see a further development of that issue coming up in February. So there could be consequences for that at that point. There could be some manipulations that some, but not all, are picking up on around August that is going to be forced out into the open in February. If there are any cover-ups going on right now, we're likely to see the impacts of that or that coming out in February as well. But yeah, I also wanted to point out this one because it looks quite similar with these alignments. So it's likely to be very directly tied in. So yeah, again, that is what I have on this eclipse. I do hope that we're able to chill out, to do the Piscean, let me take some time out and withdraw from the situation before making a commitment thing, rather than feeling like we're forced to make a decision or forced to get on board with something that I would really avoid. I hope that we're also able to make a lot of constructive progress with the trine that's developing between Jupiter and Saturn. And again, the next video next week is going to be diving into that as well. So that is something I think to look forward to. I think it's going to be really wonderful for us to work with. But yeah, with all of that said, if you enjoyed this video and you don't mind giving it a like or hype, I would really greatly appreciate that. Consider sticking around for future videos by subscribing. We do tend to do these deep dives into the major alignments that are coming up and then taking them through sign by sign for horoscopes. There's also information in the description box and the pinned comment for personal reading bookings, as well as membership information. So I do weekly forecasts on the membership side. I also do monthly courses there. There are discounts on readings for members, as well as free reading drawings. So definitely check that out. And thank you so much to the members of this channel for your support. It really means the world to me. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into the sign by sign. All right, so for Aries, on the 28th of August, we are going to be getting a lunar eclipse in Pisces, and that's going to be in your 12th house. Now, this is the place of your inner world, of your imagination, of your subconscious, of your internal perspective, your intrinsic kind of attitude toward life. This is a place where things occur that are somewhat outside of our control. This is a place of solitude, the things that we work on behind the scenes or in private. This is also where some self-limiting beliefs, really beliefs of any kind, but along the more complicated lines that we tend to work on, like self-limiting beliefs or fears or things like that, can also come through. Of course, hope and optimism, this intrinsic feeling that everything's going to be fine, also winds up coming through in the 12th house as well. So this is going to be bringing that energy back up. It's going to be heightening that energy again for you. And it's going to probably present you with a very long story about how this area of your life has been going for a while. So, of course, we've had the eclipses in September of 2024, September of 2025, and now. And they've been highlighting this area of your life. They've been encouraging you to prioritize rest and well-being, a clarity of what your internal perspective is, maybe working on things behind the scenes. But I do have to say, and I think this is a critical point that this eclipse is probably going to be highlighting for us, it's actually not been since 2003 that we haven't had major action going on in Pisces. So we had Uranus move into Pisces in 2003, and then once it cleared out, that was right around 2011, then Neptune came in. And then right around 2023, of course, we wound up having eclipses here. And then right around 2023, Saturn wound up joining Neptune here. And then in 2024, we have the eclipses. And this is going to be the first time in a very long time after this eclipse that this area is really clear, that there's not this major emphasis on it. So how has this area been developing over really long term, over the past 23 years? This has probably been an area of some level or another of focus for you. It may have felt like there's been a lot of things that have gotten stirred up that were just kind of laid on your path that you had to work with. Now, of course, these are things that are outside of your control, for better and for the more complicated, that we begrudgingly need to adjust to and need to respond to. And then also the really wonderful things, the serendipitous things that just seem to kind of come out of nowhere and that were perfect for us in that moment. So that's what tends to go on here, and it's been going on for a while. So I think that this is giving us this last kind of perspective of like how has your attitude changed over the past 23 years? I mean, that could be your whole life, around what spirituality means for you, what your well-being means for you. Do you tend to prioritize this when fears and limiting beliefs come up? Have you developed a kind of courage of just looking them in the face and dealing with them on the spot? Or do you still maybe tend to sweep those under the rug? Those are really ready to be released at this point. So you may get some real, like, you're ready for it, you are fully matured in this area, experiences of recognizing, I really don't need to hold on to internal patterns or internal thought processes or feelings or conditioning, even from like your very early childhood, that may keep you stuck or may keep some held emotions in this area. It's safe to release those because you have so much experience, so much wisdom in this area at this point. So this should feel like something of this culmination or release point that's been a long time in the making for you. So like not only closing a chapter, but really closing a volume of your life in this area. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't still have an inner world and everything, or work on things behind the scenes, but it should feel like something that you're quite adept at this point when it comes to doing things on your own, when it comes to needing to believe in yourself, when it comes to knowing that point at which you have worked and worked and maybe you're getting kind of burnt out and needing to take some time out to rest, knowing where that line is for you, knowing how much time you have, knowing what your feeling about time is. Do you feel kind of restless about that? Learning all the coping mechanisms of dealing with any sort of internal psychological or emotional or spiritual restlessness. Now, I will say for you as well, again, this is a highlight. Again, it is the last one, but it's still getting highlighted. And so if you do feel like there is this extra guidance coming through for you, or that your better angels are really with you and helping you through this moment, that also wouldn't surprise me. So if you want to work on like meditation or connection, divination, connecting with those better angels, I think that would be really wonderful. Again, I will say that the star that is highlighted here, it is associated with Archangel Gabriel, if that is something that you want to work with. But you may also find, again, I'm sure you're very familiar with this at this point, of like serendipity coming through maybe conversations or news with this square to Uranus in your third house. This has to do with like communications and just your everyday life. There may be things that are said that trigger this recognition of how much you've grown. Maybe you are dealing with someone who hasn't spent all that time in the inner world and working on that. And that is kind of making you realize, hey, everyone hasn't been doing this. This is actually something to be really proud of. And now as we move forward with the planets, Saturn and Neptune have just moved into your first house. The eclipses are going to be going the other way because they always go retrograde. They'll be going into your 11th and your 5th. So these are much more expressive places. This is more now about coming out into the open, visibility, pushing things forward, active planning, active engagement. But now with a huge amount of internally developed wisdom that, again, I think is going to be really highlighted here. I will just say this area is coming up again. Pay attention to burnout if you need to pull back, especially what I was saying about withdrawal and allowing for that Piscean quality to kind of guide you more than trying to sweep things under the rug or to not deal with them. Just kind of pull back a bit. Check in on your own perspective, your own feelings, your own intuition before you make decisions around this time. And I would say give yourself a really big pat on the back for everything that you've been doing and along all of these lines and all of these themes for decades at this point. But yeah, I think that is really a lot of what I have for you, Aries. As I mentioned, this is part of a pair of eclipses. The solar eclipse is on the 12th of August, and that is in your 5th house. I just covered that in the most recently published video. And with all that said, I thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I hope this eclipse treats you very well. All right, so for Taurus, we have on the 28th of August a lunar eclipse in Pisces forming in your 11th house. This is the place of hopes, dreams, aspirations, your social identity, the social groups that you belong to. So, this is going to represent a major culmination or release or turning point around all these areas. But it's also a little bit bigger than that. So, of course, this is the lunar eclipse that is following on from the solar eclipse that just took place in your 4th house, which we just covered in the most recent video. But this one in Pisces is following on from a very, very, very long time that we've had major energies in Pisces in your 11th house. So it's not just that this is the final of 3 lunar eclipses, one in September of 24, another in September of 25, and then this one where you're reaching this sense of culmination or being able to close out a chapter. But before that, we even had Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. We also then, before that, even had Uranus moving through Pisces. So this area of your life hasn't really been settled and quiet for about 23 years. And this is really going to put a cap on that or put a nice little bow on that. Now, it may wind up really increasing these energies again. It may heighten this area, but it is representing a major clarification around how far you've come in this area of your life over the past 23 years or so. So what is it that you've learned about relating to others, about working with others, about collaborations, about aspiration and striving for your goals, and always moving the goalposts when you accomplish an ambition of yours, pushing yourself further, staying optimistic about your goals, believing in your dreams. It's likely that this has been an area that has been highlighted in different ways over the past couple of decades. It may have been quite surprising, it may have been quite confusing at times, but you've needed to work through it. And I'm sure that you have with those outer planet transits. So I would really expect a big culmination point around who it is that you relate to. So this could be represented literally in some major changes around friendships or community connections. If this is something that you feel like you've been outgrowing for some time, this may be unavoidable to recognize at this point. Eclipses often have to do with evolution and maturation. And so it could just be speaking to a need to release some things that aren't really going to help you going forward. But it could also represent if you have struggled in this area, and some of what you have learned over time is feeling like you belong, feeling like you are enough, or feeling like your contributions are really significant, feeling like you are able to have a strong influence in this area, feeling like you're able to size yourself up based on your own aspirations and goals rather than just along the lines of like social expectation, for instance. Additionally, if there's been a very long-term dream that you've been working on, or even a series of them over, the past couple of decades, maybe throughout much of your life if you're pretty young, this could be really putting a cap on that, accomplishing it, achieving it. And then again, knowing now how to pivot, how to say, okay, now what's next? That's what the 11th house does. So you may feel like you're closing out not just a big chapter, but even a volume of your life of things that you were aiming at, starting fresh in this area now. You may also have some real opportunities to show off the leadership skills that you've developed in this area over the years, to show that you are an expert in maybe dealing with people or managing groups of people. Maybe this is the attitude that you bring to projects as well. And that may be very unusual. It may be quite weird as to how those opportunities wind up presenting themselves to you. They may come out of nowhere as well. There may also be a financial component to a lot of this. So this square between that eclipse and then Uranus in your second house, this is the place of your personal resources. Often it will show up literally in like material resources, but it is also like your skills, your talents, your sense of self, what you bring to the table. So there may be some connection between what's going on with the social groupings, with your social identity, and then your values or how much you value yourself. If there's a desire, for instance, for financial independence, maybe this is moving away from colleague and collaboration relationships and working a little bit more on your own as you're going forward. So I would expect for this to be a pretty big pivot point when it comes to your aspirations and what you're aiming at, the resources that you are utilizing, but also developing. But I really want to emphasize here that it's not just an eclipse that's going on here. It's really like closing out this really long story that's been developing over decades for you. And I would really recommend patting yourself on the back for how far you have come, how much you've grown, how much you've matured, how much you've mastered this area of your life, and especially to really believe in yourself then going forward. This should be an area of your life that seems to go a little bit more smoothly going forward. I also wouldn't be surprised if it feels like there's some divine guidance in this area, a lot of intuition about what your next steps should be, what you should be pouring your energy and effort and optimism into. But yeah, that is a lot of what I have to say about that. It's interesting too, again, about kind of like working on your own or independence, aspirations and ambitions and stuff like this. The eclipses, as I mentioned, you just had one in your fourth, but the other side of that is going to be some eclipses in your 10th house. So this is more about just kind of pushing forward on your own, being in control of your goals, of what you are achieving, of what you're accomplishing. It can be somewhat more independent. Again, it can speak to like leadership roles and things like that. The planets that were most recently here have moved into your 12th, which can also represent kind of working on your own behind the scenes, being self-directed as well. So that may be a major theme that's coming up, and it may be, again, through mastering collaborations, from learning from others, from teaching others, etc., that this has been made possible possible as well. So again, give yourself a pat on the back. I hope that this eclipse treats you super well, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Gemini, we have a lunar eclipse in Pisces developing on the 28th of August in your 10th house. So, this is the place of your public life, of your reputation, of your legacy. This is often the career path, but it's also just kind of the future path that is laid out ahead of you, what you are trying to accomplish, the mark that you are wanting to make on the world. So, it's very future oriented. It's also following on from a solar eclipse that is taking place in your third house on the 12th of August. And the most recent video that I published was about that. But this one is really special for a very different reason, which is that not only is it closing out a series of lunar eclipses that have been in Pisces in your 10th house in recent years, the first on September of 24, and then September of 25, and then now this one. But before all of that as well, we have had outer planets in Pisces since 2003. So since 2003. 2003 to 2011, pretty much we had Uranus in Pisces, and then Neptune moved into Pisces, and then Saturn joined that Neptune in 2023. Those finally moved out this year, and now this is the final big thing that's going to be going on in Pisces for quite some time. But it's also very unusual to have a sign occupied by such huge energies for so long. So this does represent a period of time of culmination or release or a major turning point around this area of your life. But I do feel like it's going to be a little bit more than that. It's not just closing out a chapter. It's almost closing out a whole volume of your life around this area. So it's going to be speaking to a lot of development, a lot of time and effort and energy and rolling with it that you've done in this area of your life. It may have been confusing. Your path ahead may have been confusing at times. It may have felt like there were a lot of obstacles. It may have felt like there were a lot of ups and downs and things that kind of kept you on your toes, sudden changes and things like that over the past couple of decades. But this is really inviting you to take a moment to look back on how much you have grown and developed and matured in this area of your life over the past 23 years or so. So eclipses in and of themselves have to do with evolution and development. And this one is really underlining a much longer period of time than is usual for an eclipse. So this is likely still to represent something of a major milestone, maybe even a crossroads when it comes to your ambitions or your career path, being extraordinarily clear on what it is that you're wanting in this area going forward. You may feel like moving on from this eclipse that you are finally clear about this area for the first time in a very long time. You may also find that there's some sort of interesting opportunity that seems to avail itself to you around this time. That could wind up coming directly to you. So there's this square to Uranus, which is in your first house, which has to do with you and personal goals, your direct interactions with other people, how you carry yourself, your perspective on life, etc. Also, like your unique self. So what you bring to the table personally. There may be some interesting, surprising, unusual opportunity that winds up coming through that is specific to you. So this could be some promotion, it could be some path opening, some door opening that you're really ready for at this point. So if that becomes a question at any point, I would really not doubt that you are almost overdeveloped in this area of your life when it comes to leadership skills and responsibility, reputation, etc. Ambition, a willingness to kind of forge ahead to envision your future and go after it. There's likely to be some kind of culmination or an opportunity that's availing itself to you around this area. It may even directly tie your personal goals and your public goals together. And it's likely to help you to step more into who you are and to recognize what's really unique about you. So this could feel like something of a liberation, maybe from status, from notions of like seeking out status. Maybe you feel like rather than reaching for a role or reaching for a title, that you're able to just focus on what is the life that I'm wanting to lead and what is the mark that I'm wanting to make without all of these other kind of intervening priorities and expectations. So it may feel like you are much more in the driver's seat when it comes to what you're pursuing around this period of time. And again, a lot of that probably has to do with your reputation or how you have handled responsibilities over the recent decades. Additionally, your experience of leadership is unlikely to feel the same as it has for some time, especially if it has felt confusing or up and down or very burdensome for quite some time. It's likely that this is going to feel a lot clearer going forward as well. So, if there are leadership opportunities that are opening up for you, try not to carry old expectations around those. Really step into them as authentically yourself. So any sort of like people pleasing or trying to play the part or anything like that, I think that that's something you can really release at this point. Additionally, because these are angular, because these are in such important houses in your chart, I would really emphasize for you a lot of flexibility around this time. There may be a major goal that is either becoming clear or that is reaching that kind of culmination or pinnacle point at this time. And it may require you to pivot to stay on your toes, but that shouldn't be too much of an issue at all for you. So I do also want to say that there's a lot of growth and a lot of opportunity, a lot of openness that's coming out of this as well. So just as the planets that were most recently in Pisces have moved into your 11th house, this is the place of like your social identity and again, leadership and aspiration, hopes, optimism, etc. So this is very social, has to do with your leadership skills, but also a sense of faith that you're able to lean into. The eclipses, though, those go in the other direction. So those are going to be across your third house and your ninth now. And so you may even find that you have reached the pinnacle of what you've been working on for some time, and that you are leaning into like developing even new skills or opening yourself up to even greater and greater and greater opportunities by taking in unfamiliar environments or unfamiliar information. Higher education can wind up coming in here, travel, so exploring different territories, maybe opening yourself up to international opportunities as well. There could even be something along the lines of having grown and pushed yourself such that you are at the point where you're able to teach what you know as well now. That also really would not surprise me. But yeah, things are really lightening up a lot. And a lot of that has to do with how much time and effort, energy you've put into becoming more and more responsible, developing your leadership skills, maturation around your goals, etc. So I would recommend taking at least a moment here to recognize how far you've come and how much you have matured when it comes to your public life. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Gemini. So I do hope that this eclipse treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Cancer, we have a lunar eclipse in Pisces developing on the 28th of August in your ninth house. So, this is the place of the expansion of your world, the expansion of your horizons and of yourself in the world. This is a place of opportunity, exploration, your beliefs, your education, travel, your worldview. So, there's going to be a major culmination, release, or turning point around these different areas of your life around this time. And this is following on from a solar eclipse that took place in your second house, which I just covered in the last video. And that's going to be on the 12th of August. But this eclipse is very special for a different reason, which is that not only is this the final of 3 lunar eclipses in Pisces that you're getting in this ninth house. So the first one was September of 24 and then September of 25. And then now this one closing out this cycle. But we also have had since 2003 outer planets transiting through Pisces. So, outer planets transiting through this ninth house of yours. So, first it was Uranus from 2003 to about 2011. And then, just as it was leaving, Neptune wound up coming in, and that was there from about 2011 all the way until earlier this year. Saturn even wound up joining it from 2023 to about this year as well. And then we had the ongoing last final eclipse coming up in this area of your life. And so this is something that has been developing for you over a very, very, very long time. And this, I think, is representing a culmination really around a whole like 23-year period of life, which has focused so much on developing your beliefs, your worldview, your knowledge, your wisdom, your life experience, such that I feel like this is kind of capping that off. It's also giving you a moment to really recognize how far you've come, how much time and effort and energy and care you've put into rolling with everything that's been thrown at you in this area. There may have been disruptions to your beliefs. You may have had crises of faith at times. It may have felt like you have needed to really strive to believe in yourself, in the world, in opportunity. But I'm sure that you have matured and developed and worked with that. So definitely give yourself a lot of kudos, for everything that you've done in this area. Now, this is an eclipse, so it's likely to turn the volume up on this one last time, representing a major pivot point or a turning point around your beliefs, around your worldview. There could be a sense of a like spiritual intervention of awakening or deepening of your faith, of your spirituality. Can also be like political or cultural viewpoints or social viewpoints as well. So there may be something that comes in like a strange experience. There's this square that's fascinating, especially in your alignment here, from Uranus in Gemini, and that's in your 12th house, which is also a place of spirituality, but it's also a place that can kind of connect to beyond the veil. So there may be these like serendipitous experiences that are just too on the nose for you to ignore, that may force you to lean into faith, that may force you to really like believe in that serendipity, or to lean even further into your philosophical or spiritual development. It may even feel like there is a very direct connection to your better angels or some sort of intuitive spiritual guidance system here. It may even feel like there's some kind of an opportunity that is available to you that's coming out of your faith, almost feeling like a reward for having stayed optimistic, having believed in yourself or in your philosophy or in compassion and goodness, anything along those lines. But ultimately, it will be shifting or upgrading or reinforcing your worldview in a pretty major way. You may even have some conscious insights into your own subconscious patterns. So, where do your beliefs stem from? That may even be something that winds up coming through here, kind of enlightening you to that. I would absolutely recommend for you, perhaps more than any other sign, to lean deeply into your intuition as well. Trust that spiritual guidance that you're getting around this time. I'd also recommend staying flexible and open. So when it comes to different ideas, different perspectives, unexplored ideas, ideologies, belief systems, philosophies, there may be, you may not need to like accept a different kind of philosophy or anything whole cloth. It could be that there are little nuggets that are fascinating about it that you want to take on board. It could be that there's this kind of insight into a philosophy that you don't at all identify with, but that is still enlightening, or it still helps you to develop a greater wisdom about the world. So there may be a kind of breakthrough in understanding here, especially again around ideas. Now, as I mentioned, this is also about personal expansion. So the expansion of your horizons, of your world. And there may be some travel opportunities that seem to come out of the blue. Those would look really spiritually, like divinely guided to you, to me, looking at this alignment. So I would really recommend considering them. Any sort of opportunity around classes or teaching, publishing, travel, exploring a different religion or a different culture. Any books or any vessels of learning that seem to stand out to you, I would really be exploring those avenues because there may be something that is really trying to get through to you around this time that could be quite surprising, and it may not be exactly where you're expecting it to be. And it may actually really have a huge impact on your mindset about things in a way that does really reinforce spiritual, personal growth, philosophical growth, deepening of your life experience. Now, what's interesting as well is that while this whole area has been developing, opening your world, etc., you've had the most recent outer planets that have been here, Saturn and Neptune, they've moved into your 10th. So they're moving into this place where you're really able to execute upon all of the growth, the development that you've been experiencing in recent years, realizing it out in the world, being able to make it concrete and real for you, being able to basically lay out a path that is very fitting of your values and your faith out in the world. So it may have taken some time to really know, like, what are you wanting for yourself? But at this point, there's this opportunity to follow that now. Additionally, the eclipses now are shifting into, because they go backwards. The eclipses are now going to be, as I mentioned, in your second house. We just had one. They'll also be in your eighth house. So they're pushing more along the lines of what are your values? Being open, being vulnerable, sharing with other people, personal transformation. So it's likely that a lot of this development of your ideas, your worldview, the expansion of your horizons is now going to be turning somewhat internal, of like expansion and exploration of your inner world, of your own vulnerabilities, of your own emotions, of your own attachments. So it's incredibly fascinating. It has probably been quite a spiritual experience for you for a while, but there's been so much maturation and development, so much personal growth over the past 23 years or so that, again, I just have to really encourage giving yourself a pat on the back, recognizing how many different perspectives you've taken on that, how many different kinds of energies you've dealt with along those lines, the potential confusion, the disruptions, the unexpected shifts and changes, the unexpected obstacles. Like I said, that this may have even come through as crises of faith at times and needing to find yourself back to that. But certainly you've grown a huge amount through that experience. So again, kudos to you for that. I do hope that this eclipse treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Leo, on the 28th of August, there's going to be a lunar eclipse in Pisces that's developing in your eighth house. And this is the place of transformation. It is a place of shared resources, of vulnerability, of attachments. This can have to do with finances, but it's also a place of emotion and spiritual connection, things that go on under the surface as well. So there's likely to be something of a major culmination, release, a turning point around all of these areas for you. And this is following on from a solar eclipse that just took place in your first house on the 12th of August. And I just covered that in the most recent video. But this lunar eclipse is very special as well because not only is it the third and final eclipse, lunar eclipse in Pisces, that is taking place in this series of eclipses. The first one was in September of 2024, and then another in September of 2025, and then this one. But before that, this has also been an area of the sky that's been occupied by outer planets since about 2003. So Uranus moved into Pisces in 2003 and stayed until about 2011. And then around 2011, Neptune moved into Pisces as well. And it stayed there until earlier this year. Saturn even wound up joining it there from about 2023 until earlier this year. And then finally, now we have this last lunar eclipse here. And then this area is going to go quiet for the first time in about 23 years after this. So this seems to me not just a basic like culmination point around a chapter of your life that may have been very focused on transformation and development and understanding of your attachments, of your commitments, of your resources and what you share with other people, of vulnerability, but it's really much bigger than that. It's something that you've been dealing with on multiple different levels for many years. There may have been a lot that you had to work through when it came to your committed relationships with people in particular. One of the more complex aspects or the more intricate aspects of this house can often wind up coming through with like complicated relationships with people. So sometimes we can run into emotional or psychological games in relationships and then needing to learn more about our own attachment style and our own independence and what we're willing to share with people and where our boundaries should be, etc. So this is probably something that you've been working on developing for many, many years and putting a lot of effort into kind of rolling with the punches when it comes to this. So could have been originally like people really dropping the ball and then a lot of confusion about connections with people, and then maybe even some complications or obstacles that really pushed that last bit of like maturation and development in this area. But what's fascinating is that eclipses in and of themselves speak to maturation and development. So it really looks like this is putting a cap on this whole era of your life, but it's also really underlining and I think giving a sense of kudos of being able to look back over just how much you've learned, just how much you've developed, how much wisdom that you have gained when it comes to your commitments to people and what you share of yourself and the complexities of different people's egos and different people's emotional and psychological natures getting involved with each other, etc. There may have even been some aspects of debt that wound up coming into this as well. Now, of course, that can be financial or material, but it can also be like karmic debt or karmic ties that seemed to come up repeatedly. So this looks like it is really culminating around that. Likely your experience along these lines going forward is going to be very different from what it's been for a very long time. More simplified, honestly, with no planets and no major energies going on in this area for some time. Now, this is an eclipse, and so it's likely that the volume is going to get turned up on this one last time. And so there may be some major developments or closure within certain connections. This could even be like personal emotional closure on a connection that hasn't been around for a while even, but it could be around a commitment that you currently have as well. There may be some shifts around your connections to people. So this could be needing to establish some final, firmer boundaries with those that you're connected to, or just in general, getting more comfortable with and prioritizing more your boundaries and what you're willing to share and what your expectations are within relationships. Really recognizing more fully your attachment style as well and what you're needing in connections in order to feel safe and comfortable and to want to share of yourself. So there is likely to be this moment of like kind of unavoidability of emotional vulnerability. That could be with someone needing to clear the air, needing to make that firm, or it could be internal as a process of really embracing what you need and not feeling the need to bow to social expectation or make yourself or make your desires other than what they are in order to have someone to connect to. So a lot of this is really going to be around finally fully releasing any sort of unhealthy attachments, any sense of debt to others, being able to forgive others, forgive yourself if that's necessary as well. As I have here, any sort of collaborations around this time are definitely going to require some clear boundaries. So don't be shy to set those. You may also find that there's something surprising coming in, that almost the catalyst for this is not so much maybe a romantic partner. It could be, but it could even be a friend, or it could be a group that you're connected with, or a social identity that you carry, where you're recognizing maybe you have held on to some notions of what your attachment style is or what you need based on some social identity and almost what's expected or what's considered, quote, normal or whatever within a group. But we can't really define ourselves by groups. So there may be this kind of clarification around, I need to do my own thing. And if I don't align with a group in this or that expectation, that's really fine. You're allowed to do that. However, there may also be some draw on your time or effort or energy or personal resources that winds up again kind of being a catalyst for you needing to put those walls up and then recognizing how far you've come in being able to do that and feeling comfortable doing that as well. Prioritizing your needs and clarity around expectations, I think, is going to be really healthy and excellent for you to lean into during this period of time, to really exercise and kind of prove to yourself and reinforce to yourself that you have deeply transformed in this area, that you have fully matured and developed when it comes to your commitments and your self-reliance and your resilience. Now, there may also be an opportunity to close out some literal debts around this time, and maybe some of them are quite old, like maybe this is student loans or something along those lines, a mortgage or something like that, like a really long loan. That would be a very literal way for this to come through, but that may absolutely be an opportunity. You may just see like a very clear pathway along those lines. And also, if debt is something that you've struggled with, this may even just be recognizing, wow, I'm able to manage my resources a lot better now. The in and out flow. I'm feeling more comfortable with this now. Recognizing the level of maturity that has gone into that and the amount of effort that you've put into that as well. Now, if you have had like the ups and downs and things like that when it comes to your commitments and your one-on-one connections, what's interesting is that the eclipses, as I kind of alluded to, they're moving into your first and seventh houses now. So there may be some new connections that wind up coming in for you. So if this is going to represent something of a culmination point of recognizing maybe you've outgrown some connections, I wouldn't worry about, am I going to be like left bereft from that or anything like this? It's unlikely. You're probably going to be developing some new ties in the coming years as the eclipses move through your seventh house. Additionally, with this catalyst that's coming from the 11th house, you may also be able to share your knowledge and wisdom with someone that's around you, especially about relationship dynamics and what's healthy and what's not, boundaries and all of that. So I wouldn't be shy to like share what you've learned with someone around you. Maybe they're a little younger, maybe they just have less experience along those lines. You may be able to help someone out a lot. Finally, you may also just feel very emotionally overwhelmed around this period of time. Mars is also in your 12th house. So this could come up as a mix between like a lot of emotion, like feeling a bit weepy and maybe not even knowing why. It's probably just purging some pent up or some held emotions. Also, this Mars here, there could be the sense of like gratitude or overwhelm of like relief that seems to come in. And again, it may not be entirely clear as to where or why, this is coming from, but I would really embrace the emotional purge that is available to you here. The emotional vulnerability may not just be with you. It may not be with other people either, though. It may be with like your better angels that have had your back during maybe some tense times that have helped you to become more independent, all of that. So there is this kind of esoteric spiritual aspect, especially to like the 8th and the 12th house here. So finally, if there is an uncomfortable situation that comes up, if you need to say no, there's a boundary thing and you're not quite sure how to handle it. I mean, sometimes for people who have really worked on boundaries, it can feel like it's more effort than it's worth to even express the boundaries, but to just know that they're there, but step away from someone. And that can also get kind of complicated. So if this is something along those lines, I would really listen to your instincts and intuition as well, because again, there's a lot of guidance that's coming through for you here. But yeah, that is a lot of what I have for you. So I do hope that this eclipse treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Virgo, we have a lunar eclipse in Pisces, which is developing on the 28th of August in your seventh house. And this is the place of your one-on-one connections with other people. So partnerships, relationships, contracts, commitments tend to show up in this house. Your close friends, business partners, romantic partners, as well as how you relate to people and kind of other people in general as well. So there's likely to be a culmination, a release, a turning point around your relationships with others. And this is following on from a solar eclipse on August 12th that is in your 12th house. We just discussed that one in the most recent video, but this lunar eclipse is looking quite special to me, not just because it is the third and final lunar eclipse in Pisces that we're going to be getting. The first one was in September of 2024. There was one in September of 2025, and then this one. But even before those eclipses started, this area of the sky, your seventh house, has been occupied by outer planets since 2003. So Uranus wound up moving through here from 2003 to 2011, and then Neptune moved into this area in 2011, and it just moved out earlier this year. Saturn even wound up joining it in 2023 and stayed until earlier this year as well. And then finally, we have this last eclipse that's taking place in this house. And so basically, this house is about to clear out for the first time in about 23 years. So it's not just a culmination around this chapter of eclipses that you've been working through, but it's really such a long era of your life and relationships that should feel like you have poured so much time and effort and energy and thought into how you relate to people. People may have felt for some time quite unreliable, a little bit confusing at times as well. They may have felt like they have presented obstacles. They have maybe felt like there's been a lot of obligations or a lot of responsibilities around the people that you're relating to as well. And they may have seemed to like kind of come and go mysteriously. But what you've been working on in that whole process is a huge maturation and personal development cycle that is now finally closing out. And that's really what this culmination point seems to be underlining here. So, top line here, what I would say is to really give yourself a moment to reflect on how much you have matured and developed over the past 23 years or so in how you relate to people, how you look at your relationships, how you manage them, what your attitude is toward them. So, for instance, how much you give, what your boundaries are, how you express those, how you are clear with people about what it is that you're wanting in connections, understanding people, generally speaking, a lot better than you did prior to this. So I'm sure that took a lot of ups and downs. It was probably very frustrating at times as well. But I'm sure with those outer planet transits that you have either willingly or been forced to take on a huge amount of lessons in this area. And you should really give yourself a lot of kudos for that. And also maybe give yourself that breath of relief of this area is about to simplify quite a bit. And part of the reason I think that of course, it's going to wind up simplifying is that those lessons are learned. So you have a lot of wisdom and experience in this area of your life at this point. Now, this is an eclipse, so it is going to turn the volume up on this area one last time. There is going to be one last phase of shifts and turning points and culmination points in this area of your life around this eclipse. So this is likely to really put a cap on who's growing with you, who's supportive of you, and maybe who's not. So sometimes with these full moons, this can represent a relationship kind of falling away. This could be just recognizing deeply, these are my priorities in connections. And you can either be in accordance with that. You can either work with me on that. You can either grow with me on that, or you don't have to, but maybe I don't have as much room in my life for that. These are my boundaries. You can either respect them or I can deal with you less, kind of a thing. And so there may be one of those moments around this. I'm sure that you've been through this a bunch of times. So it shouldn't be that complex at this point. It may feel very familiar, but if it's any consolation, this is likely to be one big last push in this area. Again, the balance between your own personal goals, your own personal needs and expectations, and those of others likely to wind up playing into this in a pretty big way. There is going to be one last lunar eclipse in your first house. That's going to be in February. So we'll discuss that coming up. But that's kind of been the name of the game, especially with these eclipses that have been coming through here, is recognizing where you end and others begin, recognizing what's your responsibility and what's not. Now, what's interesting too is that there is this square to the eclipse that's coming from Uranus, and that is in your 10th house. And so you may find that there is a catalyst on one or the other of sides of this. So this could be the lunar eclipse that's really catalyzing a major shift or a change in your career that is somewhat unexpected. So if you are maybe carrying yourself differently or not burdening yourself with responsibilities that aren't yours and therefore maybe making even a stronger impression, this could be a career breakthrough that's coming through for you. There could be an opportunity to partner up with someone on like a business partnership or like creating a firm with someone. But it could also be that there is a career shift that is impacting your connections with people as well. So you may be developing along the lines of, and this doesn't just have to be career, it can be like your future ambitions and goals, and a sense of liberation and clarification around what you're truly wanting for yourself in your future could really clarify to you, how are your relationships impacting that? Are they helping or hindering? So that catalyst could come from the 10th house into this eclipse as well. So recognizing your future goals and your connections and what is the relationship there? Is it helpful or is it a hindrance, right? And then making the decisions that are necessary in accordance with that. That catalyst as well may seem to come out of the blue. A lot of this is likely to be unexpected or to come from unusual direction. So this could even be someone who is of influence, someone that you look up to, that is even kind of directly pointing out to you or giving you some advice or guidance about someone that you're connected to. So, I mean, in one very literal example, it could be someone that you look up to saying, hey, you shouldn't put up with that from that person. And them saying that just really kind of driving the point home and enabling you to kind of give yourself more permission to draw those lines and to expect better. On the other hand, it could be a recognition of your boundaries maybe being violated by a boss that puts too much responsibility on your shoulders, and then recognizing, I need to pivot my career goals or this job. Maybe I need to look for something else because I can't tolerate being held in this way, or this doesn't seem right. This seems like it's too much that's being expected of me, or something like that. So again, how you relate and your career are likely to be mutually catalyzing change in each other during this period of time. So again, communication is going to be incredibly important here. It may not be the most clear thing, though. That's one thing that is a little bit unfortunate about how this is all set up, is that this Mercury, even though it's by sign in a very strong position, it's in Virgo, it loves to be in Virgo, it is there with the sun, so it's a little bit blotted out by the sun there. It's also ruling Uranus, which can be a bit surprising. It can be a bit confusing. It can be a bit disruptive. And so there may be new information that seems to be coming out of the blue. So if there is any sort of miscommunication or confusion that's going on for you, I would give it a little time in order to clarify. But you may find that there is some like surprising communication that winds up coming through that does enable you to strengthen the bonds of those that are growing with you, that enable you to clarify maybe again your boundaries, and then that may work out. Someone may meet you halfway on that, and that can be absolutely wonderful, and therefore have a really wonderful impact on your experience of that relationship and your idea of your future and how your goals are going to be shared with someone else. This doesn't always have to be like weird or rough or badly disruptive news. It can be like, oh, the path is clear going forward because we are on the same page. And now I know that I can be more honest and authentic with you in communicating what I'm wanting. What else is interesting about this is that the eclipses, as they're moving on from Virgo and Pisces, what they're moving into is the 6th and the 12th house for you. And so with Uranus newly into your 10th and then the eclipses moving into your 6th, this may also really point to deprioritizing personal relationships for some time and focusing on professional or mundane life goals, or the accomplishments that you are setting out to achieve, or like the path that you want to lead. So, your big future goals are likely to actually be a lot more important to you going forward than what's going on with your relationships and your partnerships and stuff like that. Doesn't mean that you're leaving everyone behind, but there's just a major de emphasis on that hasn't been experienced for a while. But yeah, I think that that is a lot of what I have for you, Virgo. So, I do hope that this eclipse treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right. So for Libra, we have a lunar eclipse in Pisces coming up on the 28th of August, and that's going to take place in your sixth house. So, this is the place of all the things that we have to get done, the routines, the tasks, the responsibilities, your working life. This is also one of the places of health and well being. So, this is following on from a solar eclipse that's taking place on the 12th of August, that's going to be in your 11th house. I just covered that in a video. But this one is quite special because not only is it the third, the final lunar eclipse in Pisces, we had one in September of 2024, another in September of 25. But even before those eclipses wound up taking place, this area of the sky, so your sixth house, has not been empty of major influences, outer planet influences, and then these eclipses since 2003. So, for about 23 years, you've had major influences going on in this area and impacting your routines and your workload, your responsibilities. So, before just these eclipses, we had Saturn and Neptune in this house. Just as Neptune entered this house, Uranus was leaving this house. So, again, this area has been incredibly emphasized, and you may have felt like you've been working so hard for so long, for decades at this point, and really maybe honing your craft, getting really good at what you're doing, getting really good at managing your time and your workload, your energy, how you are able to apply that constructively and productively, how you're able to manage give and take and notions of service. So, this is representing not just like a regular eclipse, even culmination and release and turning point in this area, but it really goes a lot deeper than that. And I think that there's going to be with this eclipse an encouragement to recognize how far you've come, how much you've grown, how much you've developed in this area of your life. How is it that you approach your daily routine? You've probably focused on that a lot. How is it that you manage your work, that you manage your teammates, your coworkers as well? How is it that you manage your health with that? You've probably been taking this very seriously for a long time and looking at it from different angles, staying on your toes and getting more and more adept and more wise about how this area of your life is managed. Now, you've probably also worked with periods of time of major burnout and working through then how to manage that, how to handle that such that you're able to get the stuff that you need to get done, but also that you're not like harming your health as well. Now, there may be this last little increase in that area. You may feel a bit worn out, a bit burnt out, but this is really encouraging you to take a moment, take some time out, simplify, release. You've definitely done enough. And if you can even rest a little bit more during this period of time, I think that that would be really wonderful. If you're able to take some time out to do things that you really enjoy, to lean into maybe some of the crafts or the things that you really enjoy doing. If you are able to take one last big look at your habits and how they serve you, I think that that would be really excellent. And keeping in mind that this is going to be one of the last big looks that you get at this area for a very long time. Now, another aspect of this that could absolutely wind up coming through, we do have this square to Uranus, which is up in your ninth house, and that's the place of education, travel, publishing. There may be something that you've been working on that you've poured a lot of time and effort and energy into that you are wanting to put on display or that you're wanting to publish or share or disseminate to others. Maybe this is even teaching because of how much work you've put into perfecting what it is that you do. You're able to teach that to others now. It could be that you have worked and worked and worked, and now you're going to retire and you're going to spend some time exploring unfamiliar territory or doing things that you haven't done before because you've been too busy. So there may be a real wonderful opportunity that really winds up capping off this whole broader period of time. And I would really just recommend giving yourself a pat on the back for all of the time and effort that you've poured into being responsible and being of service to others over the past decades. I would also really recommend, if you do have a specific routine, expect for it to be disrupted in somewhat weird ways. It may be wonderful ways. The ninth house is lovely. So if that Uranus is stirring things up, it could be that there is a really wonderful, fun change to your routine. There may be some sudden opportunity that winds up coming in to travel somewhere and you just decide to hop on it. But this is going to keep you on your toes a bit. And additionally, if there's any habits or aspects of your routine that you're actively wanting to change through this time, this would be the time to do it, especially if it's around like simplification or making this area easier for you. You may even find that there's some clarification. If you've had weird symptoms, like sometimes there's these invisible things that happen, like, autoimmune stuff and whatever. And if you've been dealing with some of those internal symptoms that you can't quite put your finger on, this may even help to kind of put a cap on that or bring some clarity around that and finally be able to release whatever that burden is as well, or at least address it so that it's not so confusing or disruptive. But yeah, I think that's a lot of what I have for you. Definitely pay attention to any intuition that you're getting about some of the changes that you're really wanting to make in your life, especially when it comes to your working life. It's also quite fitting that now that this area has cleared out, we're going to start getting these eclipses moving into your 5th and 11th houses. As I mentioned, I just covered one that was in your 11th house in the most recent video, but these houses are really about hope and aspiration and fun and doing things that really inspire you as well. So all that effort really seems to be opening some doors for you to be able to kind of call the shots when it comes to what you're putting your time and effort and energy into going forward as well. But yeah, I think that is a lot of what I have for you. So I do hope that this eclipse treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Scorpio, we have a lunar eclipse in Pisces developing on the 28th of August in your 5th house. So, this is the place of your self expression, of your creativity, of your pleasures, your joys, your interests, hobbies. Entrepreneurism also winds up showing up here, as do children and the inner child as well. So, this is following on from a solar eclipse that's taking place on August 12th in your 10th house. And we just covered that in the most recent video. But what's so significant, and I really want to underline about this eclipse, is that not only is it the third and final lunar eclipse in Pisces that we're getting, the first one having taken place in September of 24, and then September of 25, and then this one. So closing out the chapter of those eclipses, but this area of the sky, Pisces has not been empty of either these eclipses or major outer planets since 2003. So this is an area that has been developing in a lot of different ways for you for a very long time. So we had Neptune going through this area since 2011, and just as it moved in, Uranus was moving on, and Uranus had been there since 2003. We had Saturn in there as well from 2023 until this year as well. So you've been developing this area of your life for quite some time. And I think that this is really going to give you an opportunity to look back over how much you've developed, how much you've grown, how much you have embraced and learned about this area of your life, how much effort and time, energy you've put into understanding this a lot better. So you may have been working on your creativity, on creative projects, on your passions, on being more authentic and less inhibited, worrying less about social expectations of you, but rather just being yourself and expressing yourself come what may. And at times that may have been somewhat confusing, somewhat challenging. You may have run into some surprises or some bumps along the road when it came to that, but learning through all of that. Also, developing the kind of permission structure internally to prioritize your pleasures and joys. So that can be your connections to loved ones, really embracing those that you just love spending time with rather than just focusing on like colleague relationships or those that are aligned to like help you get ahead in your career. This is really about, having prioritized care and love in your life. Sometimes this may have been developments that came through romantic relationships as well, learning how to be really authentically expressive in those connections and really getting in touch with the emotional fulfillment that comes through really being yourself, being able to be vulnerable and wear your heart on your sleeve and follow your heart as well. There may have even been some situations at times where it seemed like the rational thing to do or the thing that was most materially rewarded just wasn't for you, and you had to make that difficult decision to follow your heart. So this is really bringing all of these things up again. Again, I think to almost congratulate you or to bring to mind just how much you've grown in this area. The eclipses tend to speak of personal evolution, development, growth. And by learning to trust yourself, that's where so much of that has been for so long. Now, this may increase the volume on this area of your life once more to kind of clear out anything that seems to be lingering, any self-doubt or following again the like social expectations that are expressively inhibiting or that limit your joy, that limit your ability to really embrace your pleasures. So there is this real opportunity to release that at this point. You've learned what you needed to learn about the limits of risk taking, how that can go a little bit awry. You've learned how to embrace pushing yourself and reaching higher while not rocking your own boat too much, right? So there may be this final kind of question mark of, are you going to follow your heart? Do you really trust yourself? Do you trust your instincts? Do you trust your intuition? You may even feel that there's some kind of divine inspiration or guidance along these lines, an opportunity or a development that winds up presenting itself to you to open up more. That may also come from this Uranus that's in the eighth house. So there could be this kind of surprise that comes in here. The eighth house has a lot to do, again, with vulnerability and openness and sharing of yourself with others. But it is also about like resources, commitments, things like this. And so there may be some resource that you are finding is available to you that is going to further enable you to follow your heart. There could be a commitment around a connection with a loved one. There could be some resources that are available to you or that you are choosing to utilize for your children as well. That's one last thing that I definitely want to mention here. If you have children, this is probably also going to speak to their development and your experience of parenthood over the past 23 years. How much that has taught you about yourself, about love, about openness, about sharing, about kindness and generosity as well. So again, I think this is a real opportunity for one thing, again, to allow this final culmination or release point to come through as an opportunity for you here. You may need to really trust yourself one last time, right? But also to just really give yourself a pat on the back. These aren't the easiest energies that you've been dealing with. Uranus being pretty disruptive, Neptune being kind of confusing, Saturn then coming through and joining Neptune there in recent years, bringing up a sense of both responsibility, but also needing to rely on faith, to believe in yourself, to build out a more ideal experience for yourself as well. Now, what's interesting as well, now that we are closing out this chapter on Pisces, of course, you have Saturn and Neptune going into your sixth house, really building out a routine around following your heart as well, bringing that authenticity, that passion, that joy into your everyday, probably your working life. We also then have the eclipses wind up moving the other direction. So they are moving into Aquarius and Leo now, and that's going to be your fourth house and your 10th. So this is more about ambitions and following through on what you've discovered about yourself, on not just sharing of yourself, but leading from your heart. Maybe really encouraging others, building others up, both within your family and out in your public life as well. So yeah, it's a fascinating development. I do think that on a personal level, this eclipse is going to be super significant because of how much it's closing out, how much it's underlining. But with that said, I do hope that it treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right. So for Sagittarius, on the 28th of August, the Pisces lunar eclipse is going to be developing in your fourth house. So this is the place of your home, your family, your emotional roots and security, your past, your conditioning. So this is going to represent something of a culmination or a release or a turning point around all of these different areas of your life. This is also, of course, following on from a solar eclipse that is taking place on the 12th of August up in your ninth house, which I just discussed in the last video. But what makes this eclipse extra special is not only is it representing a culmination around a series of eclipses that have taken place in Pisces. So we had a lunar eclipse there in September of 2024 was the first in the series, and then in September of 25, and then this is the final one. But even before these eclipses, we have had a very long period of time where there have been outer planets transiting through Pisces as well. So around 2003, Uranus went into Pisces, and then just as it was clearing out, Neptune wound up moving into Pisces around 2011, around 2023. Then Saturn wound up joining Neptune here. So this is really not just a chapter that is culminating. This is really a volume of your life around your home, your family, your past that is getting underlined as something that is deeply, deeply fully developed at this point. And I think that this is going to represent not just a cap on that level of development, but also an opportunity to really give ourselves a pat on the back about how far we've come, about how much we've matured, about how much time and effort and energy we've put into understanding on a lot of different levels all these different areas of our life that have been getting highlighted by the Pisces house in our chart getting transited for so long. So this could be looking back, digging into your family of origin. There may have been so many different developments. There may have been a lot of needing to stretch yourself to understand maybe where family members are coming from, or stretching yourself to support them, or even releasing some expectations, maybe even forgiveness if that's an issue when it comes to your childhood. So having matured and matured and released so much along those lines over the past couple of decades. This could even be pointing to the development of your own created family over this period of time. This may have been a major focus of yours, and you may have grown and matured and developed through the creation of that family as well. This could even be just a long process that you've been going through of like making peace with or understanding your past overall, digging into your own emotions, digging into your own subconscious, understanding your true self very deeply, and being willing to pull back all of those different layers. So again, this may have been a really long emotional process that you have worked through for a very long period of time that is finally getting capped here. So with all of that said, again, this is an eclipse, so it could wind up raising the volume on all of this again. There could be some major changes or culminations or releases that come up around living arrangements or your home, your family situation. This could be people moving in or out. This could be partnering up with and moving in with someone. I would definitely expect for that to go quite a bit differently than it has in the past, as long as you are really internalizing all the lessons that you've had around living with people. This could be starting a family as well. And again, I would recommend looking back on how have you processed your own family of origin and your experiences with them? What have you learned from them? And what have you learned from becoming independent of them as well? Applying all of this wisdom that you've developed going forward, it's a strength at this point. You may also find that if it's been difficult to manage or negotiate your family relations, especially around your emotional foundations, that this is really giving you the permission to address that, to expect a different kind of an outcome. So you may be rebuilding or renegotiating some roles that you've played within your family of origin. That may even be something that you've processed for a very long time is what role kind of were you put into within your family? Were you able to really grow and bloom on your own, or were you kind of pigeonholed? And what impact then did that wind up having on your relationships out in the world? This can help you to renegotiate that. Now, maybe directly with your family, that would be lovely. Or if that's not possible, then at least recognizing that you don't need to fill that role and that you have fully matured out of any sort of restrictions or limitations in this area of your life, that you have outgrown that past. So, finally, again, this could also point to some other kinds of changes like improvements or renovations, repairs to things in your home that wind up coming up around this time. I would say if there's a contractor that you are working with, I would stay potentially pretty flexible. There may be some missed deadlines, there may be some miscommunications. I would really try and be as clear as you can on that front. Or if, for instance, you live with a partner and there are some changes to the home that's going on, try and make sure that you guys are both really clear about expectations with that. That flexibility and communication and clarity and understanding, compassion, patience, this is all really going to help with any sort of changes that are going on in your home. What's interesting as well is that there may even be some light that is coming to how much you have developed and matured internally, that the catalyst for you recognizing that is coming from outside of yourself. So this could be someone doing something that tends to trigger you and it just finally doesn't. Or either that or like the trigger is finally really clear, or maybe the origin point of why that is, and you're able to finally release that or finally recognize I've developed beyond this and that's no longer a part of me. That's something that I can let go of. However, it could also be someone just acting crazy and you recognizing, I used to do that or something like this, and I've matured beyond that. It's been so long since that happened to me or something along those lines as well. This Uranus, though, that's part of why I'm saying this, is like this could be a trigger point around this eclipse too. And it's out in the seventh house of other people. But this is also the place of partnerships, relationships. So there could be an interest, there could be like a marriage or a significant relationship that is also catalyzing this in you, recognizing how far you've come. Maybe this is even literally recognition coming from outside of you of someone saying, wow, you have matured so much. Either way, this is certainly the universe giving you permission to really recognize how far you've come. If home life, if family life has been a struggle, that would kind of make sense because of the outer planets moving through this area, making it kind of confusing or unpredictable for some time. But now, after this eclipse, you finally are able to settle in here. So expect a different experience of home, of family, of belonging, of feeling rooted, of feeling emotionally secure going forward. And also give yourself a pat on the back for how much of this development has come through you rolling with the punches, you rolling with all of the obligations, the confusion for years at this point and learning from it. But yeah, as I mentioned, the eclipses now, we just had one in Leo. Those are going to be moving into your third house and your ninth house going forward. So this is a lot more lighthearted. It's much more about expansion, about connection with people, about learning, about exploring. So this is a lot more lighthearted than some of the pressures that you've been dealing with in your public life and your private life, maybe over the past couple of years, making some major decisions and so forth. This is more about the options, the opportunities that are available to you. Additionally, the outer planets that were most recently here moved into your fifth house, which is really encouraging releasing any sort of inhibitions, taking care of the inner child, embracing joy and pleasure. So now, after all of this internal work that you've done, it looks like you're able to kind of relax and have a little bit of fun going forward as well. But yeah, I think that that is pretty much what I have for you, Sagittarius. So I do hope that this eclipse treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Capricorn, on the 28th of August, we have a lunar eclipse in Pisces forming in your third house. So, this is the place of your community, communications, your daily schedules, your everyday life. This is also the place of your conscious mind and learning. So, this is going to represent something of a culmination or a release or a turning point around all of these different issues. And this is following on from a solar eclipse that just took place in your eighth house. And I just covered that in the most recent video that's on August 12th. But this lunar eclipse is incredibly special, not just because it is the final of a series of lunar eclipses in this place. So the first lunar eclipse in Pisces in your third house took place September of 2024, and then there was one in September 25, and then now this one. But even before these eclipses started taking place in this area, there have been outer planets moving through Pisces for a very long time. So Uranus first moved in here in 2003, and it stayed until about 2011 when Neptune then moved in. And Neptune has been there since earlier this year. Saturn also wound up joining Neptune there in 2023, and it was also there until earlier this year. And then finally, we have this final eclipse that's taking place in Pisces. So this isn't just closing out a chapter, it's more like it's closing out a whole volume of a period of time in your life where there's been a lot of focus, there's been a lot of shifting ground, there's been a lot of responsibilities and obstacles and needing to learn about connecting with others, about your community, about belonging, about your ideas and opinions on things, about your everyday life and how to manage that. It may have felt like this has been quite confusing, but through all of that development for decades at this point, there's a real maturation, I'm sure, that has come to this area of your life and how you manage it. And again, for you, this is pretty broad. This is like your everyday life, the ins and the outs, the people, places, things around you, schedules, learning, ideas, your conscious mind. So even your thought processes, your communication style, a real maturation and development of that I think this eclipse is going to encourage really recognizing and giving yourself a lot of credit for. Now, once this eclipse then moves on, this is also going to represent something of a simplification of this area of your life. Yes, it's something that has developed very thoroughly, but it's something that you've also really mastered. So there's other areas of your life now that you're able to focus on more. Now, this is an eclipse. And so it is likely to raise the volume up on this area of your life one last time. It could bring up a lot of changes, again, culmination or feeling like something is reaching a tipping point around communication, around learning or community. This could be sibling connections as well. Siblings show up in the third house, neighbors, again, that sense of belonging. So the people around you may feel like they're shifting. And there may even be a sense of outgrowing that is a part of this. You may be just utterly approaching your community connections differently from this point forward. It may be something that you are focusing on a little bit less after this eclipse. And so, really putting a pin in this. There may be one final shift to your routine, to your schedules, to your time management. There may even be something of a breakthrough here when it comes to your time management, especially around those routines. So there is this square that's coming from Uranus in the sixth house. This is literally the place of your routines and your working life, the tasks and obligations that you have and responsibilities and so forth. And so there may be one last shift that you're needing to adjust to here, but you can absolutely handle it now having really mastered this area of your life. This may even be something of a release of an obligation. So finally being able to let go of something that's been taking up a lot of time or a lot of mental cycles. There may even be something to do with a technological tool that you're no longer needing to use, or could be a breakthrough around some technology that's coming in that's going to allow you to be a lot more efficient when it comes to your time management. So the new things along those lines, I would recommend embracing them if there's something that stands out to you that feels like it's going to be a solution for you, that's going to allow for you to simplify your day. But this could even be like an old outdated program that you've been forced to use at work that you're no longer having to use and just breathing a sigh of relief from never having to touch it again. It could, though, also be like a coworker that has been something of a drain on the energy or the vibes, and needing to kind of keep your cool and be responsible about that, and finally being able to let that go, release that. It could even be a specific role or some extra duty that you've been doing, something that maybe even shouldn't have been your responsibility, but that you were taking on that you're now kind of being liberated from. So, yeah, I would expect your day to day schedule life to shift around this period of time, but it's likely then to kind of stick with you in that way for a while. And that may be what's quite a bit different from this, because you may be hearing this and like, man, I feel like my schedule's been shifting for like 20 years and I've been having to stay on my toes. This could be something that you wind up really settling into now, with this area kind of getting cleared out for years and years to come. You may even be like intentionally changing some of these habits or routines, your schedules, in order to adapt to priorities that have matured, priorities that have developed, maybe even priorities where you're able to kind of call the shots a bit more as to what you're focusing on when. You may even be able to delegate some things at this point. Additionally, you may find that through conversation or through your exchanges with people around you, that there's a lot of insights that come through. You may gain a sense of clarity or a deeper understanding of those around you. And what's interesting too is you may recognize how much you've matured and developed over the past 20 years or so, just through some off the cuff kind of comment that someone makes. This could be recognition from someone of saying, hey, you've come so far. Or it could just be through how someone else is comporting themselves and recognizing how much time and effort and energy that you've put into clearing your mind and your habits and your behavior out from behaving maybe in some kind of a way that you're recognizing. Or this could even be through acting upon some reprioritization. If someone is really putting a lot of pressure on you and is trying to delegate to you things that aren't your responsibility, this could be a major turning point or a culmination point around standing up for yourself verbally, or being able to say no. That may have been something that's been developing over the years, not feeling the need to take on responsibilities just because they are there and someone else isn't wanting to do them. This could even be specifically a mindset or some way that you think about yourself or the world or how to approach people. But again, whatever this is really culminating around, when it comes to your everyday life, your connections, your community, your sense of belonging, where you live, your schedules, it's not just one culmination point. It's really putting a bow on the fact that this is something that you've worked on for a very, very, very long time. And therefore, your options may be different now. So you may have more freedom to choose to go in a different kind of a direction, one that feels more suited or at least more comfortable to you as well. But yeah, other than that, what I would also say is just kind of paying attention to your conscious thoughts as they are kind of floating through your minds. Maybe look at some of the origin points if there's any anxieties or restlessness mentally that winds up coming up around this time. You may find yourself kind of fretting about, oh, did I get everything done? But again, I think that a lot of the lesson to this is going to be that you're past the point where you really just drop the ball or forget to do things, that you're past the point where you should have to worry if you do have to take care of something last minute, that that's going to be a problem. So there's this kind of, again, maturation about just being able to take care of things, manage your time, manage your obligations in a way that's going to work for you, that's going to be really functional. And also then communicate in a way that is conducive to your personal goals as well. So yeah, what's interesting is, of course, the planets that have just cleared out from here, they've moved into your fourth house. So this is much more rooted and you have a lot more control over those planets now. Additionally, the eclipses, those push in the other direction. So the eclipses, as I mentioned, we just had one in Leo on the 12th, and then they're going to be in this axis of Leo and Aquarius going forward. So this is much more of a focus on your own personal resources and your control over situations. Another thing with the third house is that it really is about like staying on your toes, staying on your toes. So it can feel very responsive, like you're always needing to react to things and that you are less in control of how things are going. But that is something that is finally shifting now. And these changes that are coming up around this point could really be putting a cap on that. So, like I said, feeling like going forward, you're actually able to settle into a routine, one that you feel is more flexible for you or works for you better. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Capricorn. So I do hope that this eclipse treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Aquarius, there is a lunar eclipse in Pisces that is developing on the 28th of August, and that's going to be in your second house. And this is the place of your personal resources. So this can be literal in the sense of income and finance and material things, but it can also be your resources, as in your time, your effort, your energy, what you bring to the table, your expertise, your knowledge, your attitude, all of these things. This is also the place of your values and what you value, what you prioritize in your life. So there's likely to be something of a culmination, a release point, a turning point around these different areas of your life around this time, around this eclipse. There was just a solar eclipse that this is following on from on the 12th of August out in your seventh house. I just covered that in the most recent video. But what really stands out about this eclipse to me is that it's not just the third and final eclipse in Pisces that we're getting in your second house here. The first one was in September of 2024, and then in September 2025, and then this one. But this area of the sky, Pisces, has been occupied by outer planets since about 2003. So Uranus moved into Pisces in 2003. It moved on in 2011, but just as it was doing that, then Neptune moved into this area. Saturn wound up joining Neptune here around 2023 as well. So those were there together. And then we started getting these eclipses here as well. And so this is an area of your life that you've been really working on developing for a very long time, that there's probably been a lot of ups and downs with, that there's been some unexpected twists and turns that you've needed to keep up with, that you've needed to pivot with. There may have been some confusion. There may have been some really wonderful experiences that wound up coming out of this area that wound up kind of reinforcing your faith. There may have been a need to reprioritize your own values in life at times. And there may have even been some obstacles that you needed to overcome and rely on faith in order to do that. So this is likely not just closing out a chapter or a culmination around a chapter of your life, but it's really like a whole volume of your life where there's been this increased focus on developing your personal resources, how you're managing them, how you're utilizing them, where they're coming from, and whether or not they're aligned with what you really value and what you truly want to prioritize in your life. So this is an area of your life where you have matured and developed a huge, huge, huge amount over the past couple of decades. And eclipses in and of themselves tend to speak to personal evolution, development, maturity, and those kind of turning points that wind up clarifying that for us. So first off, with this, I think that this is capping off a major period of your life that you should probably feel very proud of, that is representing the culmination of a huge amount of hard work that you've put into this area. So that is top line of what I would put here, is to just maybe take some time to reflect on how much you've developed, particularly since 2003 in this area of your life. This could have looked like you becoming a lot better with money. It could be that you have put a huge amount of effort into developing your skills, into figuring out your priorities and how to follow through on them. This could be the management of a lot of different property or things like that as well, that you've needed to bring into balance. And I'm sure that you have with these major outer planet transits that you've been dealing with for some time. So what have you learned in this area? Give yourself a pat on the back and really try and internalize that around this period of time. Also, this area of your life is likely to be experienced very differently on the other side of this eclipse going forward, because of the fact that finally this area isn't going to be complicated by outer planets. Now, this is an eclipse, so it's going to wind up bringing the volume up on this area of your life in this moment again, one last time. So there is likely to be a major focus on your income, your personal resources, how you're utilizing those. And you may be making one big last pivot around this period of time, or one big last clarification of what it is that you're actually trying to accomplish or acquire for yourself. What do you truly value? Especially if you are to leave aside the expectations of others or the keeping up with the Joneses, etc. What do you truly value? And not only what do you value, but what do you enjoy? What gives you pleasure? What do you love? What do you want more of in your life in order to better enjoy your life? That's something as well that Uranus may be bringing into the picture here. So, the square to Uranus, this is in the place of your passions, your pleasures, your enjoyment, your hobbies, interests, creativity, also your children, loved ones wind up showing up here. And so there may be this kind of catalyst around this is something that I love, and I really want to finally invest in this because I've worked really hard at getting really good with how I am investing my resources. And I'm good now. And I know that I can take that time out, that I can really enjoy these resources now. This may be literally a creative pursuit that you are wanting to pivot toward, that you're wanting to prioritize. It could be some loved ones. It could be like literally moving closer to loved ones or something like that. This could be family resources that are also getting sorted out in a way that's going to free you up. But value is really coming into this in a big way. And I think that one of the things you're going to decide that you really value and that you want to prioritize is the freedom to follow your heart. Now, this may also have something to do with new ways of earning money or income as well. So, again, if you've been really on the straight and narrow and trying to sort out like how to put yourself in a really great financial position, you may be in a position now to be able to pursue some kind of independent source of income. Like maybe this is a creative thing that you do that you're going to be able to monetize now, or maybe it is some kind of entrepreneurial venture that you have the resources that you're going to be able to follow through on it. Now, this can point to a risk. And if there is like a risk that winds up coming up for you of, am I going to invest in this thing or whatnot? I would say there may be an opportunity that comes up around this eclipse. See if you can give it a week at least to kind of follow through on a decision along those lines. Look at it from different perspectives, because there may be a little bit of information that's not totally clear here quite yet. So give it a little time. You've had so much going on here for so long, another week won't hurt. Additionally, if there is any like security concerns, or if that's been something that you've struggled with a bit, is like scarcity mindset or feeling insecure, like in your person, or feeling insecure materially, or even if you know that you over fret, that you know consciously you're good, you're fine financially, but you still just kind of worry about it and you still, squirrel away as many resources as you can, there may be an opportunity to kind of release that. Again, especially if you're really good, but you're still squirreling things away, you may decide that you want to spend a bit on something that you really want and that you're going to kind of give yourself permission to do that. So how can you utilize your resources in a way that is actually going to bring you joy? That I think is going to be a big question here as well. And especially if that is along the lines of your talents or your passions or something. By that, I mean, if there is a way to invest in your passions that is then going to wind up reinforcing the resources that you bring to the table, that would be really wonderful. So again, for instance, if this is like an entrepreneurial thing and you are like investing in the materials to be able to pursue like a side hustle or something that you really love, and you're able then to develop a secondary income or something from that, then that's kind of creating a feedback loop basically between putting resources into the hobby and then possibly getting resources out and kind of reinvesting. Maybe a really wonderful loop that you're able to create here as well. And there may be an opportunity, or you may even just kind of get a wild hair to want to do that at this point. There may also be a lot here about independence and self-reliance that has come up for you in, all these like recent decades, basically. And that could even be changing how you are carrying yourself and how you are approaching connections. So the eclipses, as they are now moving on from the Pisces and Virgo axis, there's going to be one more in Virgo before we fully move on, but they're moving into Aquarius and Leo. So they're moving into your first and your seventh houses, which is like a fresh way of approaching life and approaching it in a way that feels very authentic and that feels self-affirming, more so than paying attention to like what are the expectations of others and how can I meet those, etc. But rather really living your life for yourself going forward and really embracing your own expression and your own values, your own openness and your own freedom going forward as well. But yeah, I think that that is pretty much what I have for you, Aquarius. So I do hope that this eclipse treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right. So, last but certainly not least, for Pisces, we have this lunar eclipse in Pisces that's going to be taking place on the 28th of August. It's going to be taking place in your first house. So, this has to do with you, your own personal goals, how you carry yourself, your sense of self image, your sense of the role that you play in the world, how you approach life, your perspective on things. It's really all about you and your personal life. So there's likely to be something of a culmination or a release or a turning point around your personal life as you're going forward here. And this is following on from a solar eclipse that is taking place on August 12th in your sixth house. We just discussed that in the most recent video. But what's really special about this eclipse is not just that it's in your first house, although that's absolutely huge. And it's not just that it is the third and final lunar eclipse in Pisces out of a series that started in September of 2024. There was another in September of 2025, and then this one. But this area of the sky, Pisces, has been occupied by outer planets since before these eclipses started, all the way back to 2003. So in 2003, Uranus went into Pisces and it went through your first house. And then it moved on in 2011. And in 2011, then just as it was leaving, Neptune went into Pisces and it's been moving through this first house. And then in 2023, Saturn even wound up joining Neptune in this first house of yours. We wound up getting these eclipses started up. And then now this is the third and final of those eclipses. So this isn't just closing out a chapter of a series of eclipses, which is significant enough and points to a huge amount of development, but it's closing out a major era of your life where you have probably felt quite pushed and pulled and needing to get to know yourself on so many different levels and needing to like clarify what's important to you, what isn't you, what's unnecessary, what's intrinsic to you, what your perspective truly is, who you are authentically, what you really believe in, what your priorities are. Like it's so across the board. You've been dealing with this for so long of digging into who you are that your experience of yourself and your goals, your role in the world, your self-image is likely to be very different on the other side of this eclipse. Certainly than it was in 2003 in a huge way. But really, then you have experienced it in like since that point, even. So that is top line. That is something that I really want to emphasize here is that there's been a huge amount of maturation and development, a lot of thinking, a lot of digging that you've been doing for a very long time. And this, I think, is giving you a big opportunity to reflect on that, to look at everything that you've learned about the world and yourself and your place within it and what you're capable of and what you care about, who you are ultimately. For so long, you've been working on that. So give yourself a lot of congratulations. I'm sure it hasn't always been easy. It's probably felt like a lot of ups and downs, a lot of confusion, a lot of obstacles, a lot of overcoming things, a lot of release, and all of this. So, what's wonderful about this is that you do really know yourself on a very deep level at this point. Your personal wisdom that you've developed over these many, many, many years, I hope that you can internalize the significance of that and the fact that not everyone has been doing this during that whole period of time. Now, this is an eclipse, and so it is likely to, again, kind of turn the volume up on, like I said, that kind of culmination or a release or a turning point for yourself at this point. Now, that could be part of that reflection process. Again, recognizing how much you have developed over this time. But it could even wind up coming up as a pretty emotional period of time where there is almost this cathartic release of the pressure that's been on you. So, this kind of emotional culmination around your sense of identity and how much you've poured into developing it in a way that was really responsible and really thoughtful. I'm sure there have been no half measures along that road. It may have felt like other people were just kind of breezing through things, not really thinking that much, and you've been in this like deep world of yours. I mean, the experience of being a Pisces is going to be very different on the other side of this than it's been for a very long time. So I would really encourage, like, look at where you're at now. You may feel during this period of time kind of disconnected from others or very different from other people as you're reflecting on where you're at now, who you are now, who you want to be going forward now that you don't have the pressure of outer planets on your personality. So how you want to move forward from here? What are your goals? Those have probably been clarified time and time again as well. What have been some of those lessons that you've learned in that process? Especially Neptune moving through here, it can be wonderful, but it can be very confusing. It can lead you down paths that seem to go nowhere, but also seem to be really wonderful and put you in touch with things that you wouldn't have even dreamed of, things that you wouldn't have even considered, paths that you would not have even considered, developing life experience that you would not have necessarily pursued if you knew that it was kind of just for the sake of gaining that experience. But again, can be deeply, deeply meaningful as well. How can you also, in this moment, double down on prioritizing your sense of authenticity? I'm sure there's been a lot of layers of other people's stuff, other people's considerations, your own projected, observation of like what you think other people are expecting of you, the layers and layers of that you've peeled off over time. I'm sure that that's been the case, but we can't really live our lives to please others. And I'm sure that this is something that you've learned, but can you double down on that? Can you reprioritize that for yourself? So again, this is a very, very deeply personal new chapter for you going forward. This is you just as yourself, not with a bunch of lessons to learn, not with a bunch of stuff that you need to work on. It's just you going forward for quite some time. All that's really going to go on here is just the normal stuff, the Pisces season. The sun and Mercury and Venus and Mars will come through here from time to time. There's going to be new moons and full moons and stuff, but it's just the normal stuff. It's not outer planets. It's not eclipses for quite a while now. So you're just going to be kind of left to your own devices for a while after just this huge chapter of personal development. Now, additionally, there's this interesting square to Uranus, which is in your fourth house. So there's this catalyst here that may be coming from your home or your family life or your sense of your true self deep down that you may have also been kind of put in touch with by Uranus here. So there may be some like deep conditioning from your family of origin. It could be like your true self feels like it needs to break free and come out and be allowed to come to the surface at times. So a lot of this has been, how do you approach things? What's your perspective, etc. But there's also this other part of you that's deeper, that's your roots, basically. That's your emotional security. And Uranus moving through here, Uranus tends to liberate things. So it's probably been catalyzing a lot of stirring that is a little bit deeper that also wants to come out. Maybe this is some deep passions of yours or like something you've always wanted to do, something that feels really, truly authentic, but maybe even a little bit off the wall. And you may feel this strong urge around the eclipse as well to allow for this to be drawn up, to really wear your own unusual nature on your sleeve and embrace that. There may also be some insights or some enlightenment as well that comes through with this eclipse about that maybe some of what you've been processing deep down is conditioning, like early childhood family conditioning, the roles that you played within family, your family responsibilities, and so forth. That may have been a lot of the source of what you've been peeling away layer by layer over these years that you've been becoming independent from or maturing out of, developing out of. There may even literally be some changes within your home and family that are also making you realize just how far you've come and how much you've matured and developed over the years as well. Now, also, really embracing all of this change and how far you've come may also then wind up catalyzing. That catalyst could even be from the lunar eclipse down to this Uranus. So there may be this sense of, I need to be my own self. I need to really embrace everything that I've learned. And that requires a little bit of renegotiation or shifting, changing some of your familial roles as well. But these are likely to be working together and to be really shaking you up quite a bit. You may even feel like there is a sense of gratitude from your lineage about how far you've come. You may have like developed in a way maybe that people in your family's past weren't able to, because of circumstances or whatever it was. Maybe inhibitions or things like that, expectations, their own family roles as well could have held them back from being able to really embrace themselves the way that you've been able to over the years here. So yeah, this is a pretty huge moment for you. Like I said, you are likely to be like experiencing yourself, your goals, your role, your self-image very differently going forward, like on the other side of this eclipse. And you should feel a lot lighter. You should feel like you're able to just kind of do your thing and not need to overthink things quite as much because of having internalized so many lessons and having matured so much. But yeah, I think that is, again, pretty much what I have for you, Pisces. So I do hope that this eclipse treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me.